Video Games Europe gives scathing response to Stop Killing Games. Now it's got their attention. Video Games Europe is a lobbying group made up of several of the world's largest publishers to try to advocate for European game devs. No, not game devs, for big AAA publishers. There's a difference. However, their response to the Stop Killing Games initiative isn't exactly supportive of what ill gamers are advocating for. That's because this lobbying group only advocates for AAA publishers, not gamers, not game devs. And Stop Killing Games hit 1 million signatures despite doubts that the petition would get enough signatures to get the notice of European legislators. Yeah, all thanks to Pirate Software for revitalizing it when it was just chugging along being dead. In the wake of this milestone, Video Games Europe felt the need to respond as the largest video game lobby in Europe. And of course, they're all for it, right? Nah. And while the statement opens with the lobby groups to claim that they appreciate the passion of our community, we don't like it, but we appreciate it. In regards to wanting to keep games around, they shut down the ideals of this initiative in every other part of the statement. They claim if Stop Killing Games demands were made into law, that game development will become prohibitively expensive. Now, Louis Rossmann kind of covered this as well. And I've talked about this for years because this is the exact same excuse they gave when they were up against some academics that are trying to archive like dead MMOs, like just for preservation purposes. The excuse they gave for why they can't even allow private servers to exist, and not even excuse, because this is actually the truth. They outright admitted that they can't compete with their older games. As long as the older games are still around and still accessible and still playable in any capacity, that's going to take sales away from their newer games. That is the crux of the issue. That is their true number one concern. They don't want the competition. If they were forced to leave all of their old games available, you know what that means? That means they could no longer enshittify their newer games. They could no longer listen to the NBA bruhs, cut costs and raise prices, bruh. Make the game shittier and charge more for it, bruh. If the old game still exists and it's better than the current one, what reason does anyone have to downgrade to the current one? That is their fear. If they had to keep them around, they would be forced to actually make their newer games better. Their new games would actually have to be better than their old ones to motivate players to stop playing their old games and play the new ones instead. In the wake of games like Anthem being shut down and never accessible again, well, technically it's not shut down yet. It's going to be shut down in a few months, but it's not like anyone ever played it anyway. People who want games to be able to exist in perpetuity continue to advocate for games being developed with sustainability in mind. All they need to do is release private server code. That's it. They don't have to spend money on it. But the loss comes, like I said, from competition. They don't want to compete with their old games because they know they can't. Stop Killing Games wants to make it mandatory for devs to either create a way for games to exist offline or for it to offer up a version of the game that fans can maintain after its life cycle ends. However, Video Games Europe is completely against the idea. The decision to discontinue live services is multifaceted, never taken lightly, and must be an option for companies when an online experience is no longer commercially viable. So what does it matter if you give someone else the ability to create a private server? You're no longer financially on the hook for it. Oh, wait, but they're taking customers away from your new games, huh? Maybe make your new games good. Have you considered that? We understand it can be disappointing for players, but when it does happen, the industry ensures that players are given fair notice of their prospective changes in compliance with local consumer protection laws. Yeah, like they basically said, oh, no, it's okay, guys. We tell them like 6 months ahead of time that they're going to be fucked. We don't give them a way to not be fucked. We just tell them it's coming. Private servers are not always a viable alternative option for players, as the protections we put in place to secure players' data, remove illegal content, and combat unsafe community content will not exist and would leave the rights holders liable. In addition, many titles are designed from the ground up to be online only. No, don't believe this lie, by the way. Remember when the X-Bone was revealed and how it was designed from the ground up to be online only? and then after enough blowback, it wasn't online anymore. Really weird. Or SimCity, the reboot that flopped. It was designed from the ground up to be online only. I saw some modders changed a few config files to make it offline, and it worked fine. This is a lie. In effect, these proposals will curtail developer choice by making these video games prohibitively expensive to create. Now, I will have to take the other side here, because inside this paragraph is, I think, their strongest argument. Most of our side just glossed over it, didn't see this at all, or it looks like they kind of did, but they just blew it off like, oh, it's just the industry crying again. It's actually right here. Would leave the rights holders liable. What are you talking about, RGE? Okay. What's a good perfect example. Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals is put out by NetEase, but it uses licensed Marvel characters from Disney. If they release private server code, and then you got the biggest Marvel Rivals private server ends up being a den of PDF files and groomers, that's going to affect Marvel's reputation and Disney's reputation, and they're not going to be too happy. And even if it was allowed in the first place, because I'm quite sure that this couldn't apply retroactively to older games, because I'd be willing to bet money if NetEase tried to release a private server client for Marvel Rivals, Disney would probably sue them. Like, no, that's not the contract we agreed to. No, you can't do that. So this is, I think, the point they were making when they said they would leave rights holders liable. I think they were specifically referring to games that they don't 100% own all the rights to. If the intent was to keep the game playable forever in some capacity, that would have had to be in the original contract with whatever they were licensing, or else this will cause legal issues. Now, you don't have to take this too seriously. You could laugh and say, so what? It's still an issue that needs to be considered, that needs to be worked out. So that's not like an excuse. I see Superman cartoon some random made. I don't blame the Superman creator. Yeah, look, it literally doesn't matter how you see it, though. All that matters is if the rights holder gets offended and starts suing, it doesn't even matter if they're right. The process is the punishment. Even if you win, you're still out millions of dollars for the fucking lawsuit expenses. That's the point they're making. And you may not agree that it's a good point, but it's probably the strongest point they have. Like, yeah, you can't force us to go against the initial contract we signed with the rights holder of this IP. That in court, I think that would be their strongest argument. That no, we can't follow this new law because that would require us breaking the contract that's legally binding that we made with this third party. Yeah, you can remove art assets so it's generic. Yeah, that was one thing I was thinking of, like with Marvel Rivals again. Like if that had to happen with that game, they could just, transform them into generic versions. Like was a 10% difference to meet the fair use parity requirements. Alternatively, all future contracts with rights holders would have to have that stipulation in there. Like, yeah, when you give us the rights to use these characters, we're going to have to keep this up in some capacity in perpetuity. And there's nothing you can do about it. And you agree to that here. And if not, then we literally will not move forward with this partnership. Yeah, this is the strongest argument they have, is the conflict it'll cause with existing laws and existing legally binding agreements. Which is why I think I actually believe that even if this stop killing games thing ends up, making it through the parliament, which I have my doubts that it will, because the game industry is bribing, lobbying the fuck out of them to make sure it doesn't happen. But if it does, I don't think it's going to apply retroactively. I think it's only going to apply to new games. This view aligns heavily with that of Pirate Software, someone who has publicly decried the Stop Killing Games movement and sided with the view of publishers and developers who don't want to take on the extra expense. Well, he's an industry plant, so is anyone surprised? Dude, he's a former Blizzard dev. Like, you could take the dev out of Blizzard, but you can never take the Blizzard out of the dev. However, it's worth mentioning that Video Game Europe's lobby is stacked with people representing some of the biggest publishers in the industry. Well, yeah, that's what they are. Studios under every single one of the publishers' umbrellas have shut down servers for a game and the product being permanently unavailable, even if the players paid full price for it. In most cases, users aren't offered refunds for the in-game purchases or the purchase of the game itself. Of course not. Like, that's something I never understood, how people expect refunds when the game shuts down. Like, that is something that should have been understood. Yeah, I mean, if you give, you're basically, your money is being used to extend the lifespan of the game, but it will eventually shut down. But that's besides the point there. All of these companies, their actual issue is what I said at the beginning. They want the ability to kill their older games because they know their newer games suck compared to their older games. If they were forced to keep their older games alive, then all of their newer games would have to improve upon the older ones in some way, or else no one would have any reason to just to not just keep playing the older games. That is these publishers' real problem. They know they can't compete with their old content, so they're just going to do everything in their power to make sure they don't have to. Video Games Europe have made clear they'll be working against the ideas outlined in Stop Killing Games mission statement. Is anyone surprised by this? That the industry wants to have planned obsolescence in their model so they can do this whole enshittification thing? This would seem like a good reason not to buy any of these publishers' games. Now, another easy solution, by the way, just don't sell people games anymore. If it's always going to be an online only live service, just make it free to play. If they never bought the game, so to speak, they lose this argument. Like, no, we got no obligation to keep the game running because they never bought the game. Yeah, they bought a few items for the game, but we never promised them it would be up forever. Yeah, or let people know up front it's a rental. Yeah. Yeah, it's the wording that's important too. Like, it might even be enough if they when you buy a game, it doesn't say buy, it says rent license or something. So your average normie knows they're not actually buying the game, they're just renting a license. That would probably be enough to avoid all of this. And that wouldn't be prohibitively expensive. They still don't want to do it though, because they know that if you change the buy button to a rent license button, that'll turn a lot of normies off. Yeah, isn't that the battle pass? Yeah, exactly. So instead of selling you a game for $80, make the game free to play and make it so you need to buy the $80 battle pass to be able to enjoy it. So you've effectively done the same thing. You've effectively sold them an $80 game, except now you're not legally obligated to keep it running forever. There's ways around this, so which is why I really don't think it's going to change anything. But it's fun watching them squirm regardless.